Hello, I'm Eric Schmid, and I'm a shareholder in Elliott Davis's manufacturing and distribution practice. Today, we're kicking off a series of short videos that are geared to businesses in the manufacturing and distribution sector. We've titled this series an operational discussion, and it features a number of team members from our management consulting practice, three of who you can see on the screen with me right now. This series is going to be respectful of your time. Each video will be about 20 minutes and is designed to be thought-provoking and impactful. We're not overly scripted here, so do expect rough edges. Furthermore, because the videos are short, we ultimately can only scratch the surface on some of the topics. We definitely welcome your input as we move forward with the series. Today, we're starting with segment 1, which we're titling After COVID-19. On that point, we do want to emphasize that we appreciate the level of disruption that many businesses are experiencing right now. These are highly uncertain and quickly changing times. We know that some of what we'll say in this segment and in future segments may be rendered obsolete by changing facts and circumstances. We also know that the degree to which individual businesses are impacted can vary dramatically. We have designed this series with the hope that it will be an aid to a broad range of leaders in businesses as they think about strategies and tactics that may be needed going forward into a potentially deeply changed business landscape. So with that, I want to hand over to my colleagues here for some brief introductions. Billy?
Hello, my name is Billy Carberry, and I work in our consulting practice based in the Elliott Davis Charlotte office. Prior to joining Elliott Davis, I worked primarily in the aerospace industry at United Technologies and in the consumer electronics industry at Apple, holding various leadership positions in operations and strategic supply chain management.
Hi, I'm Stephen Lynn. I'm also part of the consulting practice at Elliott Davis. I sit in our Charleston office. My areas of focus are around strategic planning, M&A, specifically pre-close planning, post-close integration and optimization, and process improvement. And I previously worked for KPMG's strategy consulting practice.
I'm Ryan Lovelace, part of our management consulting team here in the Greenville office. I previously was a strategy consultant with Boston Consulting Group and was at GE Energy before that. I've worked with a number of companies on different strategic initiatives, 5-year strategies, pricing, designing supply chain from middle market companies to Fortune 500s.
Ryan, a couple of you guys in the intro sort of mentioned thematically things that we might focus on. Just talk super brief about our practice a little bit more.
Yeah, so our practice has 4 topic areas: strategy, operations, M&A, and IT. Within strategy, this is things like strategic planning, growth strategy. Within operations, you can think of Lean Six Sigma implementations or broader turnarounds and transformations. And then in the M&A space, topics like due diligence, post-close integrations, and then finally in IT, this is anything from system selection to implementation.
Okay, and is there a lot of variability in kind of the scale of projects we work on, or are they all big, they all small, just what?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a wide range of projects that we work on with clients. This can be anything from, on the strategy side, a 1 to 2 day workshop to we've got transformations that are still ongoing over a year into the project. I think one of the advantages that our practice brings and the structure that we have is the ability to be flexible and work with clients to fit their situation and their needs for the project.
Okay, good. All right, so let's jump into the content here. What we're going to do is cover a couple of topics kind of in rapid fire conversational style. And Stephen, I think I'll start with you with a question that is probably a pretty heavy lift to answer. But are we facing a new business reality? Has there been a paradigm shift, broadly speaking, or is it likely that the bulk of businesses will return to the old normal fairly quickly?
Well, you're right. That's a big question for sure. And we can talk about the curve. I think most people at this point have heard or they've read something about it. There's a whole lot of speculation about what this recovery is going to look like. Is it going to be the V, the sharp collapse, and a relatively quick return to the pre-virus levels? Or is it more like a U with a longer dip, a slower recovery? I read a recent Wall Street Journal article that talked about the swoosh, the Nike swoosh. And I think, they're talking about a large drop. And I think the quote was something like a painfully slow recovery. So that kind of forecast expects, like many economies, including the U.S., is to not be back to 2019 levels till, late next year or beyond. And then there's the W. You've heard about the W. So the virus has a resurgence in the fall or the winter after things open up and people go back to their lives and work. The curve could really look, I think, different for different countries, for different industries, and even for individual businesses. And a lot depends on your business. And I guess ultimately, moral of the story, I would think, is that we need to prepare for a long haul. In other words, don't expect the V. So we've heard a lot about this new normal, and it sounds like a buzzword, but I don't know what you guys think around trends you think companies need to be preparing for.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all hope and expect that there will be a strong pull to return to normal. But based on our conversations with leaders in manufacturing and distribution, our research, and really our own operating experience, and we do believe that there are trends here that are likely to be sticky, meaning that there are probably going to be implications for business owners and manufacturing and distribution that really are going to outlive the current crisis and probably even persist through 2021. So when we think about these trends, what are they? First, we really expect to see shifting supply chain objectives, a new focus on security of supply versus lowest cost. We would expect that really as a result of both the coronavirus and the recent trade war, really kind of a 1-2 punch to global supply chains, that we'd expect to see renewed focus on finding new secure sources of supply. The second trend that I'd expect to see is really new working arrangements that will require changes in processes to policies and management behaviors. And we expect to see, especially in the manufacturing business, the implementation of staggered shifts, continued reliance on virtual work, especially for management, restrictions on meeting sizes and business travel. And manufacturers are going to have to become far more flexible at maintaining productivity and worker engagement, despite these significant deviations from what we might call normal. I'd also say that I'd expect that with regards to technology, I think that we're going to see that the adoption of selective technology really becomes an imperative. Companies that have invested or are investing in automation and Internet of Things technology, and just to kind of reduce that buzzword to something practical, digital production systems, digital monitoring systems. I think the companies that make those investments are going to begin to outperform their peers. And lastly, I think that we're going to see significant shifts in end user demand that are unlikely to quickly recover to baseline or pre-COVID normals. There are really two categories here. We see both end user demand shocks, both good or bad, that could take 6 to 12 months to recover from. But we also see shifts in end user consumption patterns, not just a total reduction in net demand, but the fact that consumers are now buying and purchasing through very different distribution channels than they were before.
Yeah, I listened to Stephen talk about the uncertainty with the shape of the curve, and I think that's a very valid statement and one that everybody should be very conscious of. And then Billy's starting to talk through some of the significant disruptions that we could potentially see or that companies may experience. The point that I focus in on there is exactly what Billy was hitting on with consumers is we just don't know how consumers will react to this. Even if the economy rebounds and you get a snapback consumer confidence or fear of that second wave taking place will have a big role in consumer spending habits. So even if they have the discretionary income, they may not necessarily go out and buy a new car, which will obviously resonate throughout the economy and through the M&D space as we see it. So one thing that we can look at is, how has China reacted? You start to look ahead of, like, I look at analogs. How has China reacted? And then more near to the economy that we're sitting in is within the U.S. which markets are further along the recovery curve and what industries have started to already bounce back, and how has that played out as people are getting back to work. At the end of the day, I would urge every company to ensure that you really understand your cash position and to go through different scenarios so that you can understand what those decisions that you need to make are over the next 6, 12, and 18 months based on a variety of scenarios that could take place with disruptions and consumer trends.
So Ryan, that kind of that last comment segues a little bit into the next thing we wanted to discuss, and I guess I would put a headline on it, something along the lines of, let's try to make this a little bit more real, a little concrete. There's a lot of big conceptual things that you guys touched on. So based on your past experience, your research, your conversations with clients and business leaders, if you think about a business that it is proactive, is forward thinking, what do you think leaders in businesses like that are thinking about right now in terms of concrete things they may want to look at? And I preface that with my own conviction that just as there have been clearly winners and losers up to this point, more losers than winners, winners and losers will percolate out of the next several months based on how businesses are reacting. So can you guys share some thoughts on what you think leaders should be thinking about right now, and maybe even a simple example that might tie in with that and kind of resonate for our viewers?
Yeah, Eric, I mean, I would say, as we've been sort of thinking this through and talking about it with our customers and experiencing all this sort of in real time, we've been thinking about this kind of through 3 critical areas that we think companies probably should focus on, those being recovering and growing the top line, for one, second, driving operational performance, and then finally, sort of a reimagining of your organization. I'd take a step back before I talk about those 3 to say, first things first, a company might need to reconfirm or even reevaluate their strategy. Has it changed due to COVID? Are there fundamental shifts that might alter the way we have to do business? And what capabilities do I need to execute on that new strategy? And where are the gaps that I have? And ultimately, what new capabilities do I need, and how am I going to get them?
Yeah, Stephen, it's interesting when I listen to you say that. I think of right now, when you think about those capabilities, a lot of companies are not wanting to make those big investments. So the first thing that comes to us is, when I'm looking at my top line, what investments or initiatives can I go through or can I take that give me the biggest return or bang for my buck, so to speak? And so as I look at growing the top line, I think there's really 2 paths. There's improving upon a current go-to-market strategy or finding new markets. And so many companies have probably seen their commercial strategy significantly disrupted as a result of this. I mean, sales channels have probably shifted, brick and mortar experience is fundamentally different. And then customers and the way that you interact with customers is probably different. I mean, some industries may be fortunate enough to not have been disrupted, but most of the time customers have probably been shifted. And so I would say that every company should be looking at their commercial strategy right now on the products that they offer, trying to understand what's different, what will remain different, and what opportunities there might be to improve. And then as you look at new markets, I've worked on a few efforts recently where we've surveyed customers and analyzed competitive dynamics, and then we've taken what those companies that we're working with do in terms of strengths and weaknesses and assess that against the market to help make decisions going forward and determine what the right path is for that company based on the market dynamics, the industry, and what their customers are really asking for. I think that's an incredibly relevant exercise right now as as industry dynamics are shifting. There will be new opportunities, and as Eric, you mentioned, there will be winners and losers. This is an opportunity for you to really emerge as a winner and take advantage of a market opportunity that exists because of the COVID crisis. Billy, I don't know if you have anything on the operations side.
Yeah, I mean, within ops, right, and constantly seeking to drive productivity and efficiency in operations, is always going to be an imperative for manufacturing leaders. But really now more so than ever with the current COVID crisis, with the context of demand shocks and the prospects of potentially a long and deep recession, now is definitely the time within operations to really get better at two things. One, managing risks proactively, and B, finding all opportunities to optimize assets and improve productivity. We can break those down a little bit more. So when I say managing risks, I spoke a little bit about this earlier, but the imperative here is to really reevaluate the criteria the organization uses to select suppliers and partners, and deeply understand the critical inputs to processes where single points of failure might occur. We have to begin to, for example, reimagine here what the procurement function can do, not just sourcing at the right price anymore, but also to source in a manner that considers the risks that are inherent in a new, massive, complex, inflexible global supply chain, and really the weaknesses of which that have been exposed over the past several months, right? So this might mean proactively seeking second sources of supply, understanding the multiple interdependencies, or really considering geographic diversity of supply for the first time, rather than over-reliance on one particular area, one particular geographical area. Second, with regards to optimizing assets, we're going to see staggered shifts most likely, potentially reduced workforce, and the necessity of improving a company's cost structure. And leaders in the M&D space are going to have to learn to do more in this context with even less. So practically, this means improving OEE, overall equipment effectiveness, even in the context of fewer workers on site on the shop floor. This can be accomplished a variety of ways: robust Six Sigma initiatives that eliminate waste, divesting underperforming assets, but also through the use of emerging technologies as well. We believe that these proactive leaders will be taking advantage of this time to achieve productivity gains that the company can benefit from, that will also outlive COVID.
Guys, that's good stuff. We're coming up on the end of our time, and before I close it out, just give you a chance. Any other thoughts, comments on the discussion we were just having?
Well, I can circle back on one of the last pieces that we talked about above, which was about organization. So COVID has forced many organizations to work differently than before. Like Billy mentioned, companies will have to figure out how to work in a leaner fashion, and you need to understand how this affects your organization design, your governance, your reporting structures. Also, if we need to be able to make decisions really quickly, how are we going to change our structure to facilitate that rapid response? Removing bureaucracy, flattening the organization, move accountability maybe down closer to the front lines. I think Billy also mentioned changes in work arrangements. And so with this new remote or distance work scenarios, how are we still fostering sort of the company culture we want to have? Where our hypothesis is that people may, tend to get disengaged through that. So those are some gaps we have to cover. And I've been talking to a lot of people in my personal life about the silver lining of all this stuff. And, I hesitate to talk about silver lining here, but a couple of things I've thought about was, if companies can take advantage of this, fast decision-making environment, maybe they could, companies could benefit from bringing that rapid response mentality into their everyday business, outside of responding to crises. And the other one that I thought about was during COVID, you're likely seeing, or you likely saw, or you are seeing your best people sort of rise to the top. You've had to redeploy people to do these very non-traditional things, and people have stepped up, not just senior leaders, and those people maybe could be sort of the backbone of your what we'll call a reimagined organization. So that was just the last thing I was thinking.
Good point. Okay. don't have time for more. So Billy, Stephen, Ryan, first of all, thank you for your thoughts. I know, just scratching the surface. So we've got about 10 more videos in the queue right now. The second segment right after this one is going to be on the subject of growing the top line, and that'll be followed by a segment focused on improving operational performance. We hope that you found the time you spent watching this video worthwhile. As mentioned before, we certainly welcome your input on anything related to this series, and we're certainly always happy to engage in dialogue with clients and others who are facing business challenges or questions that they're wrestling with. So with that, I'll say thanks for watching.